Chernobylite is a post-apocalyptic game based in Chernobyl that truly surprised me. Currently only available on PC, but with plans to come to console, Chernobylite combines many of the unguided, open world elements I love from the Stalker games with a fantastic story like Metro, but with really meaningful choices, akin to Fallout New Vegas, that have a real impact on the ending of the story. No spoilers here, but the game literally has that Fallout credit summary, where the narrator changes what they say depending on the decisions you made in the storyline. It even has a Fallout 4 base building system. All of this while still offering its own unique spin on the post-apocalyptic survival game. But it does have its issues, and we'll get into those after a word from our sponsor.
Brothers, I have been scavenging the wastelands for days, and I cannot find any sustenance. Only this junk. Dmitri, what do you have for me today?
Старикан сказал, что так и будет.
What's this? Dmitri, you have G fuel. I've been looking all over for this.
Ну хоть платит нормально.
No, you want me to pay for this, Dmitri? I thought we were friends. There's already a sale right now, and you're telling me I can use my code ESO for another 30% off at checkout? This is why I come to you and not Vladimir. Hey, give me that G Fuel and grab some for yourself from the link below.
So Chernobylite is a science fiction horror survival RPG game that has you travel through Chernobyl to find out what happened to your fiancé 30 years ago. It was made by a tiny indie company that actually went out to Chernobyl and scanned the environment using photogrammetry technology in order to make realistic textures in-game. You can actually play through the entire game voice acted in either English or Russian.
Я готов продолжить дело великого крысолова. Ну, что дальше, босс?
For that true immersion. And you can buy it from the link below for $30 or £23 at launch right now. But watch my review and my walkthrough before you make that decision for yourself. At first glance, Chernobylite might turn some people off, but it has a great difficulty system that allows you to adjust the difficulty of each major aspect of the game. So if you love combat, you can put the combat on the hardest difficulty so the gunfights will be harder. And if you hate scavenging for resources and you want that aspect of the game to be easier to allow you to find copious amounts of materials, you can set that to easy. And also you can change managing your base and companions and put that on easy as well if it's not an aspect of the game you're interested in. Some people love those micromanaging aspects and other people hate them. But the fact that there's a difficulty setting for each one of those separate parts of the game is fantastic. So each day in Chernobylite, you're going to start off at your base camp, which lets you select a mission or an activity to do for that day. Whether it's scavenging for ammo, for food or medical supplies, or completing a story-based mission. As you grow your teammates, you can also start to assign your companions to missions as well. But be careful because they can fail those missions and they can be kidnapped. Chernobyl itself is split into 6 open world zones that can be explored individually. Now these zones, in terms of scale and size, some of them are pretty big and quite densely populated with different buildings and houses and things to explore. And I really took my time walking around them and exploring them. You'll end up returning to each one of these areas and exploring them on multiple occasions. While the architecture and the placement of the buildings and trees and whatnot remains the same, lots of other aspects of the zone changes. The loot that you're going to be scavenging will be randomly hidden around the different zones, some behind locked doors that you'll have to craft lockpicks for. There'll also be random events marked on your map. This can range from a different clue that you might discover in that location that may help you find your fiancé in the future, or a trader or NPC, or maybe some random events will occur in different places and you'll need to be scavenging for clues to piece together the mystery of what happened to your fiancé and what the NAR soldiers are doing at the power plant. Now the interactive map will also indicate radiation levels, and sometimes there'll be helicopters circling above parts of the zone, which indicates a concentration of military patrols or radioactive storms and mutants that you may come up against. This constant changing of the environment means that each time you're exploring the open world, it's still enjoyable and it felt different each time you visited the same location. And the random events that would pop up all over the map would spoon feed you a little bit more information on the storyline so you could piece together exactly what's going on.
I can't shoot a dog. I just can't.
Look, it isn't easy. I get it. But these animals will die anyways. And in the meantime, they're spreading radiation everywhere. It's a mercy.
But the price has doubled. Surely you understand, given the circumstance.
What? What the hell are you? No, no, no!
Or sometimes it would just be a jump scare, which my audience loved but my underwear did not.
Jesus Christ! I'm okay.
The times of day you're exploring these zones also change the weather patterns and the lighting, which is very beautiful in Unreal Engine 4, especially with all the photogrammetry assets that were created for the game. You'll notice that some assets and buildings are very similar to other buildings, but I wasn't expecting this small indie team of developers to recreate several houses that are all completely unique. In fact, if you actually look at Soviet architecture, a lot of the designs for these huge scale apartment blocks and concrete buildings were actually exactly the same. That said, there was definitely enough variety in the placements of these buildings and how each one was decorated inside to make me feel like each time I went out into the zone it was an adventure. You'll really feel immersed. During your time in the zone, you'll encounter soldiers that can be taken out stealthily or engaged in gunfights. Now, the stealth system in Chernobylite was actually really satisfying to play. You can get a bunch of perks that I'll talk about later that can improve your stealth, and even wear camouflage armor that improves your camouflage and reduces the noise that you're making. All of these are stats that tie into the stealth system and genuinely make a difference to combat. Ducking in and out of bushes and peeking around corners to make sure that you could take down enemies one at a time without them spotting you or hearing you was just so satisfying. It was honestly my favorite part about the game, to try and stealthily approach the level and take everyone out without anyone knowing I'd actually been there. It was even possible to attack enemies head on with the pistol, the AK-47, rifle or shotgun, all of which are customizable by the way, to quite a ridiculous degree. Like, the game didn't have a lot of weapons, but it had all of the iconic ones, and you could really customize them with silencers, barrel extensions, magazine changes, and it would affect the recoil, handling, and all of these other aspects of the rifle. I mean, the depth of the weapon customization for a game like this was honestly nothing short of incredible, and I really enjoyed customizing each gun to give to my follower and myself for my own playstyle. Now, on hard difficulty, gunfights were rather thrilling, especially if you get caught out of stealth and suddenly you were getting shot up from 3 different angles. But if you're playing the game as a run and gun sort of playstyle, you'd quickly find out how silly the AI often were. It was rather easy to take advantage of them during a straight up gunfight. The enemies would be aiming in your direction, but you could kind of shoot them through one gap that they couldn't really see you through. There was just a lot of ways to sort of exploit the AI and their stupidity, which made the game a bit easier than it should be and less punishing if you actually were caught out. Or just generally, if the AI outnumbered you, they would very, very rarely approach you or flank you or respond to the situation to make it more advantageous for them. I think I died maybe once or twice maximum, and in that sense the AI was a little bit disappointing. But AI is something that can be improved and worked on still. I just think that the AI really lets down what could have been an absolutely incredible game. Now, if like me, you are playing the game very stealthily, the whole stealth system was very enjoyable. As long as you're not playing this like a Call of Duty game, you're still going to find a lot of enjoyment in the combat system. It just has its flaws, and sadly, it's the AI. But honestly, I still thoroughly enjoyed the game despite that. Chernobylite also has a very unique mechanic. If you've ever played the horror game Amnesia, you'll be familiar with this. You see, each time you kill someone violently, or you shot someone or you're shot at, obviously if you get hit, you're going to lose health. but also you'll lose psyche. This is essentially your mental health bar, and especially early on in the gameplay, this meant I had to consider whether it was worth engaging these enemies and fighting them, or just sneaking past and trying to walk around them. Having a low mental health would lead you to seeing and hearing things that weren't there, and even result in death. It is possible to craft certain items at a campfire while you're in the zone to reduce this though. You could also craft traps that would obliterate both human enemies and mutants, and since you could return to each of these different locations throughout the gameplay, any traps that you set up previously would still be there the next time you came, so you could almost have like an escape route planned out with lots of different traps just in case. And if you did get irradiated by the pockets of radiation that randomly exist throughout the zone, you could create anti-rads to reduce the amount of health the radiation took up, or even just general medication. Managing these free stats was rather enjoyable to me, but it definitely became a lot easier towards the end of the game when I began to have way too many resources than I needed. During your time in the zone, you'll also be meeting various NPCs, both traders and potential companions that you'll be going on missions with, and these characters are carried by the writing. Some of them are just so memorable and absolutely hilarious to listen to.
He lured the silly little mouses with a chunk of smelly yet delicious cheese, but it was poisoned.
My favourite were Tarakan and Mikkel, and I don't want to spoil anything about the storyline or what these characters are like, because if you play the game yourself, you'll enjoy them or hate them in your own way. Doing anything in the zone though would reward you with experience. Each time you leveled up, you get a skill point that could then be used to learn a new perk that can only be learned from a companion. So each companion has several different perks that only they can teach you. Some of them were really unique and others just increased the damage of your assault rifles by a percentage, but were nevertheless very valuable to the gameplay. After you've finished your objectives, you can then leave the zone, and that concludes the day. You then needed to share out your food rations to your companions. Not eating will negatively affect both your companions' health and mental stability though. It was very important to maintain everyone's happiness and make sure everyone was fed. On the harder survival difficulties, you would end up with situations where people had to get half a ration or even no food at all. You could then talk to your companions and they would teach you new perks on request. Each companion had a different set of perks to teach you, and they would actually take you outside and give you a real mini game each time they showed you a new skill, which ranged from shooting cans to running a parkour course, or even a hilarious lecture on how to pack a bag. Some of the companion characters for this game are so unique and memorable, I really did fall in love with them. Companions do have a relationship with you that changes based on your base's condition and the food that you give them, but most importantly the choices you make during the story. Like, do you let this person go or do you kill them? Do you blow up this ammo or do you take it with you? One teammate will usually suggest one thing and another will suggest the other option. So you'd always find yourself having to make conflicting decisions and balance your companions' relationships with you. In my own playthrough, I managed to finish the game with all 6 members of the team still with me to the very end, and you can watch that playthrough linked below. It's also a walkthrough of the game as well. But it's very possible to get them all killed or have them leave your party because they hate you so much because you negatively impacted them with the story decisions you made. Chernobylite is really the kind of game you need to play through several times to experience the whole storyline properly. Sometimes you can have decisions you made several hours ago come back and bite you in the arse, or accidentally killing your teammate and never experiencing their whole questline, or just not hiring them in the first place and therefore not having to deal with their opinions at all. It's been a while since I've played a game where the developer doesn't mind you missing half of the content that they work so hard on with each playthrough. But for those of you who enjoy completing things or even reloading saves, Chernobylite has a very unique mechanic where, without spoiling so much, you can essentially mess with time. It makes sense in the theme of the game's narrative, but the game would allow you to go back and change decisions that you'd previously made, which could unlock other quests and change relationships with other party members during your playthrough. Changing the past even had an impact on the future, or alternatively you could completely ignore this system and not use it at all. But the web of choices gives you an idea of how many impactful, important decisions there are within this game. In total it took me 20 hours to finish the game, but I've played for 30 hours in total. For a game that's $30 or £23 at launch. Link below if you want to grab it for yourself, by the way. To be frank, the gameplay I got out of Chernobylite was really fantastic. I've got bored of other games in half the time, but I really enjoyed Chernobylite all the way through. As you progress through the game, you'll also be finding clues about the NAR soldiers, what they're doing here, what their plans are, and also Tatiana, your fiancée that disappeared. After you've pieced together enough clues, you can actually reenact a simulation that gives you this cinematic walkthrough Fallout 4 memory-like experience where it pieces together all the clues and explains the whole story without you having to read each one of the clues and figure it out for yourself, which is a nice touch. Another thing you'll be doing in your base camp is building your base. You can build crafting benches to create armor, customize your weapons, and even create energy weapons, like the rail rifle or the plasma gun. You can also make lockpicks and medical supplies, or grow food in the garden, and make different furniture and beds for companions. The system is very similar to Fallout 4. You really just place the items where you want them, and you need to use up the materials you scavenged in order to build them. But it goes a bit beyond that in terms of management. Like, you have to balance your companion's comfort with the machinery that you're using, which makes noise and has a negative effect on the environment. Perhaps it requires extra ventilation. Not having enough generators for the amount of electricity you're using will make your lights begin to flicker, and that will lower team psyche and morale, or bad ventilation can have an ill effect on your team's health. So you really need to be careful about what you're building and manage it in such a way where one thing doesn't outweigh the other thing. But using this system, you can kind of create and personalize your own base, which is a really cool, fun thing to do between each mission. And obviously if you don't enjoy it, you can put the difficulty down to easy, and it makes everything much cheaper to build, so you can progress the game even faster. Early on, I found the gameplay of balancing resources between companions and crafting rather tricky at times, but as the game progressed and we got to the middle of the game, it got easier and easier to the point I really didn't need to care about having too many resources all the time. If you're still unsure about buying this game for yourself, do check out my full walkthrough of it. Just watch part 1 and see what you think. The game starts off with a very much corridor linear story, but then it really opens up in the middle of the game, allowing you to really choose what you do and where you go, before ending with a final heist mission to the power plant, which is very enjoyable. I don't really give games a rating out of 10 because I think it's meaningless. Instead, I just show you the gameplay and let you make up your own mind whether you think this game is for you or not. Personally, I really enjoyed it, and it really surprised me, more than any other game I've played this year. Drop a like on the video if you found it helpful though, and I'll see you in the next one.